that. Um, and a few other points I want to make is that we're in unprecedented times right now, and there's a lot of resources out there. We're trying to provide, Summit Insurance is trying to provide a steady flow of content that's being pushed out through email, social media, and these webinars. We're working to have a weekly webinar next week. We have another one on a similar subject on employee well-being with our personal health partners, who's going to be One Health, who's going to be the presenter. And then the following week, I think that's going to be May 7th, we're going to have PrimePay talking about compliance during this challenging time. So again, stay tuned for a lot of good content coming from Summit along with our partners. As many of you know, the Paycheck Protection Program was approved a few weeks ago, and we went through $350 billion relatively quickly. And hopefully some of the participants on the call were able to take advantage of that program. And I think many of you probably know that last night, I think the House signed, and I think the President may have signed the second funding piece for the PPP program. So additional funding is going to be available. So look for that. And one thing I would suggest is checking with your local municipalities. Loudoun County has developed its own program to provide grants to small businesses in Loudoun County. So if you're a Loudoun County business, make sure to check into that. We've pushed some information out of it. And if you're not in Loudoun County, maybe check with your own county municipality to see if there's any additional resources and capabilities that might be available to you to help in your situation, either as an individual or as a business. I encourage you to reach out to them. And then I think this afternoon, Governor Northam of Virginia will be talking and discussing when businesses will be opening up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But with that, I'm going to hand it off to Carly and Sandra from Cigna Healthcare. And I think what's important for everybody to know is that they're going to be presenting some important content on emotional well-being. And Cigna is a very strong partner of ours and really a leader when it comes to employee outreach and tools and resources and ways to help employees. And they've certainly been leading the way with providing content and resources and a variety of other things to helping employees that are challenged right now in this new working environment. So, I strongly encourage, any evaluation of your benefits is that taking consideration that Cigna Healthcare is one of the leaders in that space. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carly and Sandra to lead us through today's presentation. Again, for housekeeping items, you're welcome to include a chat box for any questions. We'll open up the mics towards the end. And the presentation will be emailed and distributed to everybody who's participating, along with a recording of the presentation. So with that, Sandra and Carly, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having us this morning. And again, just want to say to everyone on the line, thank you for joining. This is Carly Horn. I work on the new business and account management side over at Cigna. So if you have any questions about this content, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is included at the end of this slide deck. I know that this is a topic that is very, very top of mind for everyone right now. So we're very happy to have Sandra Shacklin, who's our behavioral clinical account manager at Cigna, on the line with us today. And Sandra's going to go through this slide deck with you all. Sandra is our expert on the behavioral over at Cigna and has over 20 years of clinical experience. So I'm going to let her take it away, but just wanted to kick it off by saying thank you so much for joining. And
Okay, my name is Sandra Shacklin. I don't know if we lost Carly or if she was transitioning it to me, but I am a licensed clinical social worker. I appreciate all the warm welcome. I'm very excited to be here today to talk to you about prioritizing emotional well-being, during this time of uncertainty and these difficult times as we're all experiencing change. So I know we are facing all these safety precautions, all these changes that we've never experienced before. I know for myself, you know, when I look back, I can't think of any other time where we've experienced anything like this, you know, where we're being asked to stay at home, to self-isolate. Think back a year ago, could you ever imagine yourself wearing a mask to the grocery store? So with all these changes on unpredictability, we're noticing an increase in anxiety, fear, and stress. So taking care of our emotional well-being is becoming increasingly important. So today, my focus will really be on, first, what are some of the common emotions people are experiencing, like loneliness, anxiety, and grief? But then how do we manage those emotions at this time of uncertainty? And then lastly, I'll wrap up by focusing on resources that can be a support to you, your managers, as well as your employees. So we all have access to the information and the support we need as we all make our way through this just unusual time. So I don't seem to be able to change the slide.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So am I going to be changing the slides, or will you be?
I think you should be able to. While you're talking, I'll try and make sure that we have that setting set.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working. I need to go back one slide.
All right, one more slide back. Just a second. See, this is the kind of technology issues that I was afraid of, but that's all right. Give me a second. Just a sec. And it's not going back. Well, Sandra, I can't get it to go backwards, so I'm not sure if you have the control over.
Well, yeah, and it says that I have the controls, but nothing's working when I hit it. So I will speak about stress, and we can envision that I have the stress slide.
Okay. All right. We'll work with that.
And I don't know if there's a way for you to take control back so you can move the slides, and then I can just let you know. That probably would work well, since it doesn't seem to be working for me.
Okay, let's try that.
Okay. So, you know, stress is a very common feeling, and when you get my deck, you'll have the stress slide, but I think most of us are familiar with stress. It's not something new to us. It's not something that's new to employees. I used to go out and talk about stress, and I still do, and it's probably one of the feelings and emotions that people can most relate to. And it's probably because of how common it is. You know, I used to start off by asking employees, oh, have you been stressed in the last month? Have you been stressed in the last few weeks? And what I came to find was that most people had been stressed in the last week, and oftentimes in the same day. And, you know, some of what happens when we have uncertainty in our life is that can really trigger stress. And when I'm talking about stress, this is a physiological response that we have when we feel like we don't have the resources to manage a situation in front of us. And stress can start off as acute, right? Like maybe you get into a car accident, or maybe, you know, at the beginning of the COVID virus, you found out that you weren't going to be able to work, or that your child's school was closed. And this could have created a very big stress response. And we call that an acute stress response. The fight or flight is activated, and you feel the adrenaline going through your body, or the stress going through your body. But for most of us, that's settled down. And we're kind of in this place where we have more of this chronic low-grade stress, where individuals might have difficulty sleeping. You know, that's a really big one that I'm hearing about, having trouble sleeping, or changes in appetite. Probably many people have seen the jokes or comments about all the COVID weight that people are going to gain. But it can be headaches and tension, and also other concerns related to increasing alcohol use. And to me, one of the things that I experience and that I hear a lot is this low energy level, which is often surprising because we're not nearly as active as we used to be. But people, are often experiencing that symptom of stress. And stress can have an impact on your overall health, especially if you have a chronic condition. But stress can also exacerbate if you already have a pre-existing mental health condition or you're more prone to anxiety. And what I like to really emphasize is stress is normal. And actually all of the things that we'll be talking about today, the emotional experiences, are normal reactions to the situation we're experiencing right now, right? That lack of control. We don't have the predictability that we're used to. And, we're managing so many things, as our households change. And we'll even see this with our children. And I think that's important to mention. You may have noticed that your young children or even your teenagers are not able to cope with things as well as they used to. And they just respond emotionally in a different way. Young children may regress. I have a colleague who mentioned that her son was potty trained, but then he had some difficulty and he's kind of regressed, and now he's struggling with potty training again. So just that's an overview of what we are seeing with stress. And we'll talk later on about how to manage stress and some important strategies.
Hey, Sandra, this is
So
Dario. Can I ask a quick question about stress and
Sure.
anxiety? I don't know how much you'll be talking about that, but I think the key thing is that everybody's under these circumstances that no one's ever really experienced anything like it.
Right.
Will you be talking some about the anxiety too? Some, my personal example is there's some, underlying anxiety for just having anxiety's sake, if that makes sense, right? It's just the fear of the unknown or something like that. Can you comment a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'm going to talk specifically about anxiety and fear related to COVID as well,
Right.
like, the fear of getting COVID and things that we can do to help address that. But honestly, sometimes people just are worried about being worried. They don't like the feelings associated with it. They judge themselves as well for having anxiety because they think that they should better be able to cope with things. And so I think there is this value in kind of normalizing and just reminding ourselves that this is a normal reaction to this unprecedented time, right? Like we haven't experienced this before. So that's a great question. You're welcome. And, the other thing, kind of unwrapping all the different emotions that we might be experiencing. A second one is certainly loneliness, right? I mean, at this time, we're being asked to socially isolate. We're being asked to stay at home. And I saw this quote that really resonated with me. And what it said was, just when we need each other the most, we're being required to stay apart. So, right now is a time where, right, when you have a lot of stress in your life, a lot of anxiety, where you would lean on the people in your life, maybe provide physical touch, get together, spend time together. And we're really restricted in what we can do in that area with social distancing. So, and we actually know loneliness was an issue even before COVID. Right, we did a study and we found that 3 out of 5 individuals were lonely already. So this time where we're socially isolating, certainly loneliness is a risk. Thinking about especially those employees you have that live alone. 35 million Americans live alone. So there are large numbers of people who may not have had contact with anyone. My husband was speaking to one of his coworkers this week that hadn't had any face-to-face contact with anybody for 2 or 3 weeks because they haven't even gone out to the grocery store. So we'll talk a little bit more about the ways to and strategies to address loneliness and increase social connectedness during this time, personally, but also even in the workplace. Like, how do we stay connected virtually, or how do we find ways to support each other in this new almost normal that we're experiencing right now as we social distance? Can we go to the next slide?
We can certainly try. Let's see yours.
Okay, try now.
Now, let's see. There we go.
Yep. Okay. So, the third thing that I don't think comes to mind as much, but is certainly that we're hearing more and more about in relation to this time with coronavirus and the pandemic is grief. We often think about this as a natural response to the loss of someone we know. So like, an unexpected death, maybe a breakup, but it can also be the loss of something important to you, right? And that can be something as simple as predictability, having more control over your life, having a schedule and normalcy where you drop your children off at school and you go to work each day. And all of that has drastically changed. And for those of us that really like that order, we may be feeling just some grief about all of this unknown and the lack of predictability. And it may even go as far as, we form expectations for the future. And when our expectations are challenged, we feel off balance or shaken, and we may have grief there. And it could be something as simple as vacations, right? I've started to hear people having to cancel their annual summer vacations. And there can be this feeling of sadness related to having to make those changes to our lifestyle. And this grieving can certainly impact your stress, your anxiety, your mood, and even your health. But once again, normal response. And we probably already have a lot of skills that we can use to manage this. It's just reminding ourselves, right? And also reminding ourselves we have experience with grief. So we'll get through this. And you can move on to the next slide, please. So I really wanted to also talk a little bit about some of the challenges, specifically human resource professionals and maybe even managers may face. And I bring this up just because all of us have unique roles, whether we're a parent or we're in human resources, maybe myself, a clinician, somebody in sales, consultants. And our job can certainly impact the type of stress and emotional responses we have to things. So human resource professionals in this time of the COVID pandemic are facing, unique roles and responsibilities at work. So you're helping to often manage the organization as well as help support employees in their safety and wellness. And right now there's a lot of information coming in related to coronavirus rules and regulations, as well as the resources. Even I know we're sending out a lot of information about resources. So lots of overload and possibly feeling overwhelmed as you're trying to prioritize. And oftentimes, there's this ambiguity with information, and you need to kind of do a little more research or just move on with the information you have. And I know even with myself, and this might be similar for some of your organizations, in the beginning of the COVID virus, information was changing daily. So we would be shared something on Monday, and then within a few days, things would be revised as we needed more information. And all of that can be really stressful, as you also are supporting employees and trying to find strategies for them to better be able to manage their anxiety within your employee population.
And Sandra,
So,
can I ask you a question on that? I think one of the challenges that I think anybody in HR leadership is struggling with is that connection and concern about their remote employees. Obviously, we're all dealing with a lot of these feelings, but obviously that gets multiplied when you got a team to manage. Do you have some suggestions on that, or will you be talking about some of that too?
Yep, I'll absolutely be talking about that. And I'll be sharing some examples of ways to form those connections within your workplace, even when people are working remotely, because that really ties into all of this. Right? Even loneliness and grief, even, because the more socially connected we are, the more we need to have, the more socially connected we are, the better I think it is to cope with all these different things.
Absolutely. Thank you.
But great question. You're welcome. So, and then, just talking a little bit about loneliness and grief. As a manager or a leader in your organization, you're also sometimes charged with making some difficult decisions. And we all know, we've all heard news stories. We hear about the unemployment going up, and organizations are having to make difficult decisions about, keeping their employees at home because of safety risks, or changing roles, or maybe even furloughing or laying people off. And, we don't often have people we can share these concerns with that really understand. So this can lead towards feelings of loneliness, but then even evolve to feelings of grief as well, as we think about the sense of loss you experience because you feel a sense of responsibility to your employees and helping them take care of their hardships. So, I just added this just because I thought it would be important just to remind yourselves that certainly, it's not just impacting your employees, but your leadership and your human resources teams, just even balancing that work and life and your unique role. We can move on to the next slide. So one of the questions that I get often, and so I wanted to make sure that I did talk about it. So how do I know if this is getting more serious and that I need to be concerned that more of a mental health issue is happening? And so I just put this in here because these are some red flags. So, grief, stress, all of the things we're talking about can lead to more serious mental health problems. And so here are just some red flags that if employees are starting to show these signs, or you're starting to experience this, that it might be time to seek some type of professional help or consultation. And that's, unexplained physical symptoms that are persisting, altered thinking, maybe difficulty concentrating, confusion, but, really a lot of drastic changes in emotions. So strong feelings of anger, maybe from an employee that, normally is very calm and cool and collected, or maybe you're finding yourself having more difficulty manage your feelings. You're extremely worried, and it's, entering your work thoughts. So you're having trouble concentrating. And we also are seeing an increase in substance use as people are using that as a way to cope with their symptoms. So these are all red flags that professional help might be needed. And we'll talk at the end more about what are some potential resources that you can connect individuals to, or even, your family if you're seeing some problems. So let's talk a little bit, move into some solutions and some strategies for coping with fear. And the first one I think that is important to mention is just dealing with the fear related to the virus itself, right? There is a lot of information out there. It can be very overwhelming about, the best way, to understand what's happening, but also how to manage it. So the first recommendation is really just to educate, but doing it in a very thought and mindful way. So picking your best resources, for information about the COVID virus, certainly the CDC and the World Health Organization are two reputable resources that are pushing out lots of information about, safety, what we're seeing with the coronavirus, but even how to manage emotional health. So there's resources at the CDC on how to manage stress and anxiety and all the feelings that are coming up related to the virus. And then, just noticing if your anxiety is going up, maybe you're getting exposed to the news too much, and just being mindful to limit that exposure, right? One of the things I used to have on my phone that I had to disable a while ago was I had news alerts coming in all the time, right? And so then I wasn't mindfully checking the news. I was just looking at negative things happening all day long. So that's a really good strategy to make sure you're getting breaks and you're not getting consumed with COVID-19. Because what I can tell you, one of the things that happened, looking back to September 11th, another time in our lives where we had very significant a disaster happen, people were starting to have secondary PTSD just by watching the news. So we found that people were being impacted by watching over and over the cleanup, the stories about people that were in the tower, the stories of loss, or even just watching, the incident occur. So limiting your exposure to the news and being thoughtful is very important. And, it's one of the things you have control over. That'll give you a sense of control. We can move on to the next slide. So one of the issues I think we're all facing is that level of uncertainty. We don't know when we're going, when some of these restrictions are going to be lifted. We often don't know what we're going to find at the grocery store. For keeping something, very simple. People were very anxious about finding toilet paper weeks ago, or certain food in the grocery store. So there are certain things that we can do, certain practices that we can incorporate into our lifestyle and into our daily routine to help build that resiliency, so we're better able to deal with grief, stress, and the unexpected. And what I have found over the years is that when we're faced with a crisis, sometimes we forget the basics. So I like to remind people, let's get back to the basics. For physical well-being, it's get adequate rest, right? So making sure that you get into a new routine with your new schedule, going to bed at the same time every night, getting up at the same time, and allowing yourself to get that, adequate sleep and rest, because we perform better and we manage our emotions better when we get a good night's sleep. Exercise could have been a very big change for people. If you're a regular gym goer and you lost that routine and lost that exercise, you may have seen your anxiety go straight up to the top. If your employees were using your work gym and now they don't have access to that, they may be also seeing stress and anxiety go up. So taking advantage of digital resources, YouTube on demand, to making sure that you can still fit the exercise in. The other physical pieces, right? Eating healthy meals, making sure you participate in relaxing activities. I know some of our clients and some of the groups we're working with are providing virtual yoga, or maybe meditation, or different digital resources to employees to help manage the anxiety and stress. And if you're relaxing, you can't be stressed. So the more you do breathing and some relaxation exercises, the more you bring your stress level down.
Hey, Sandra, this is Dario again. I think you bring
Sure.
some good points about the resources that Cigna has to offer, and a lot of gyms and yoga facilities are doing a lot of video stuff. But I think one thing that's a positive is, in our team, we're doing a step challenge, and people that normally wouldn't get out and do some exercise now are doing it, right? If you go out any nice day, there's so many more people that are walking and riding bikes and getting out and about. So that's maybe a positive side thing that's happening.
I would agree 100%. I think we're also, communities are getting closer together, because you're seeing people in your neighborhood more, even if you're saying hi across the way. But I'm hearing more and more groups doing physical challenges, like you just mentioned, to help bring employees together and promote that well-being. So certainly something to consider. And it's not just your physical well-being that you want to focus on, but also building resiliency emotionally. And that's, once again, reaching out to people who care, reminding you this isn't even just an issue here in Maryland and the Mid-Atlantic, but in the nation and actually in the world. So we all have that commonality and can help support each other. And taking time to shift the focus to yourself. Many of us are caring for our family. We're helping to care for employees. And it's important to shift the focus to yourself. And one of the big things that I like to highlight here, especially for human resource folks, managers, is that oxygen, right? You hear about it on the plane all the time. So in order for you to be able to care for other people, you need to take care of yourself first, right? Put the oxygen on yourself before the person sitting next to you. So lots of ideas here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the other one that I did just want to mention, and it kind of ties into my next slide, is really, structuring your time, because that's how you're going to find that balance. Sometimes when we just kind of leave things to chance, things don't always line up the way we want. So you structure your time so you have the important things in there, like maybe some relaxation in the morning. And, you know, that becomes increasingly important, you know, as we're all transitioning to work at home. And I guess maybe I shouldn't say transitioning, I should say we have all transitioned, because actually it's been several weeks now for many people. You know, using all the resources your employer has to offer to help find your rhythm, maybe information about teleworking, ergonomics. And I will remind you as a manager of human resources, not just to push these out to your employees, but to make sure you're taking advantage of them yourself. And bookend the day with routines. And the thing that comes to mind here for me is even, you know, starting the workday, maybe the same ritual that you had for work, like having your cup of coffee in the morning, and ending the day, actually physically ending the day and maybe closing your computer. Because one of the challenges with working at the home is you can blur the lines, right? So that you end up working late into the night, and maybe you need to, but doing that mindfully and not just because you walk by your computer and you're on there. So, you know, physically do something, some type of ritual to help remind you that it's the end of the day so you can take a break from work. And then lastly, you know, setting realistic goals for you and your family. So if you're partially responsible for managing your children and helping educate them, which we know many people are, you know, taking care of their kids and their work, you know, you might have to build time into your day, or talk to your teams about how to build that into their day so that they can realistically get their, you know, meet the responsibilities of their work, but also their family. So here is just sorry, I thought somebody was asking a question, but I think that's my voice. So here's a plan to help control stress. And part of why I put this in here is because sometimes we just say, okay, well, I'm going to do things to help me manage stress. And sometimes when you keep things very vague that way, they don't actually happen. So here is a very specific layout of different options to help manage stress. And I encourage you to identify things in each category. So as you notice stress happening, that you can also, you can make sure you're working those things into your day and into your daily routine. And this is something like this would be a great tool for your employees, since we know that most people are probably experiencing stress now. So P is a period of time to unwind. So actually scheduling some time or setting aside some time during the day, you know, where you can have time to unwind. And, you know, oftentimes people think, oh, well, I don't have time for that. So if you only have 5 minutes, then that's what you schedule to start. If you only have 10 minutes, that's fine. And maybe that's when you have that cup of coffee in the morning, you know, before everybody gets up, nice and quiet, or maybe it's at night after everybody goes to bed or during lunch. But it's really important to have that and to take breaks, because it makes you more efficient. When we run, we actually don't work as efficiently. Having a location to de-stress is also very important. You know, having a spot in your house or a special place even outside. Luckily, we're still allowed, you know, we're still able to go out walking and spend time near nature. And if we get used to doing that, you know, I find that when I get on my yoga mat now, that I start to feel relaxed just by getting on the mat, because my body knows that's my relaxing place. And then the last two, activity and name. So just making sure that you have some good go-to activities identified that you can do during this time of COVID. Because maybe your go-to things you're not able to access right now. And it could be just reading a book. People are developing virtual book clubs or activities. So taking advantage of those type of things. And then making sure you have the name of some people that you can connect with if you are feeling stressed, so that you have you know, somebody to vent with or to talk to about your feelings. So a great stress plan.
And Sandra, if I can just jump in here really quickly, can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, everyone, I think I cut off earlier, but I was just going to say that, you know, for any current Cigna clients, and just so you know how things operate at Cigna, there's a dedicated health engagement consultant to each of our groups. So that's a resource that can help our clients to set challenges around the physical, around the mental, Something that current Cigna clients might have done in the past is work on setting up challenges around physical, walking challenges, something like that. Now is a great time for those type of activities, but we could also, change our focus of those. So maybe it's not, we're doing a walking challenge and everyone is getting in 10,000 steps every day. Maybe it's that plus, checking off the box, I meditated for 10 minutes today, or I did something for myself for 30 minutes today, and incentivizing, employees on a broader scale to be thinking about themselves and making sure that they're taking care of themselves. And that's a resource that, we can facilitate, but these are just some good reminders of things that can be done, within the employee population. Starting an employee book club, for example, is a great way to get people connected, and then also shift the focus to make sure that people are being mindful and taking some time for themselves.
Great points, Carly. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute talking. So, moving on to talk about loneliness, and I think this ties in a lot to what Carly is saying, and even, Dario's question earlier, is there are things we can do individually, but even as a employer to help, with that social connectedness during this time. So individually, certainly we can stay connected via Zoom or Google chat rooms to do social gatherings. I've seen, all sorts of pictures on Facebook of different classes that are still occurring, like Taekwondo for the kids. But that technology can also be leveraged in the workplace. A few things that I've noticed is like a fitness challenge, like we've already talked about, to help bring employees together. And that's like a double purpose, right? Like you can connect socially and kind of joke with each other and challenge each other about how you're doing, but also you're working on your physical fitness at the same time. But even like doing virtual coffee breaks, right? To connect with your coworkers and maybe get to know them on a different level, as well as doing, we did a people bingo. So so somebody gathered all this information about different colleagues, and then we had to guess who the person was, and that's something that can easily be done virtually. So it's just, being creative, even just starting off your conference calls with a little bit more time to chat about how people are doing can be very meaningful. I've noticed that actually has just started happening naturally. We can go on to the next slide. Now, and talking about grief, just to wrap back around to that, one of the best practices is really just to, remind yourself that this is a normal reaction and practice self-compassion, understanding you're not alone and just allowing yourself to experience the emotions that you're feeling. So acknowledge, some of the loss we experience and even the commonality that many other people are doing that, and you'll eventually work through that. And certainly if you find that it's persisting, accessing some of the resources I'm about to talk to can also be very helpful. So starting to talk about resources, what's available for employees right now. I think, one of the things that we're noticing actually is that there has not been an increase in behavioral health utilization. So our EAP has not seen an increase in calls. And I think that's been a little bit surprising to folks, but it's because people are really focused on the basic needs, right? So they may need support around community support and help getting food for their family, getting connected to financial resources, and even, some other community resources to address safety, right? Like people are just very focused on the basics right now. We do expect emotional well-being, emotional health, mental health issues to rise. So here are some, the other thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of digital resources being offered by carriers. So, Happify is an app that anybody can access on the web. Certain carriers like ourselves may develop partnerships with digital apps for enhanced capabilities. But for example, Happify helps increase resiliency. You can check in with it. They have positive news stories, but also focusing on mindfulness and coping. So great resource right now. And other platforms like iPrevail, you know, Talkspace, different platforms out there where people can get support online through on-demand coaching to help address mood concerns. You know, these are great alternatives, and people can, you know, do that in place of formal therapy, sometimes for issues like loneliness, stress, or even grief. So I encourage you to check with your carriers and with your plans to see what resources are available for employees, you know, digitally.
Yeah,
And then
Sandra,
on the next slide, yep.
Sandra, I'm kind of surprised that you guys haven't seen an uptick in the EAP access. That's really surprising, but I think you made a good point
Yeah.
about people's basic needs are the first thing that they're focusing on.
Right, and I do think that as things stabilize, you know, as those needs are being met, that we are going to start to see an uptick, kind of like this rebound, as people kind of stop and notice, right? Sometimes we're not even aware that we're feeling that stress. So I think that that will shift. We just haven't seen it quite yet. So, you know, this is just a reminder. I know most people are familiar with the 1 to 3 sessions, right? Or the 1 to 5, or whatever your session model is for your employees and their household members. But EAP is so much more than that. So I wanted to highlight a few things. We know that finances are a big concern for people right now. So most EAP programs do have financial services included in their work life. So that might be something you want to spike out for your employees. You know, some even can include consultations, right? So they can talk to somebody about finances and how to manage right now if their situation has changed. You know, also childcare is available for, you know, as people have to go back to work, if their regular childcare program isn't available, or they need to schedule alternatives since kids aren't in school, that's often part of EAP where folks can get help identifying resources. But I think even equally as important are the resources for managers and for human resource staff. So if you are noticing loneliness in some of your employees, or anxiety, or concerns that they may have a mental health issue, right? You're noticing changes in conduct, then many EAP plans have management consultation available, unlimited. So you can call and talk to a clinician or an EAP specialist about what you're noticing, and they can help give you some guidance. You know, and they often have, you know, specific resources for managers and organizations. So if you haven't received information or resources from your EAP about COVID specifically, or resiliency, or some of the things that we've talked about, you may want to just check in with them and see what they have available. Because, you know, certainly webinars and wellness seminars are being received very well right now. I think we're seeing record-breaking attendance in some of those type of things. I just spoke to a client earlier this week who did a stress management seminar for their employees, and they were so excited about all the participation and all the questions that people are experiencing. So I do think people are starting to notice the stress and anxiety and are looking for options to help deal with that. And then lastly, the last slide, and then that still gives us plenty of time for questions. I wanted to remind people of virtual care. So I think a lot of times when we think of virtual behavioral care, we think of medical, but we are seeing a huge shift in the mental health area. You know, we have a lot of providers that are doing video-based care, and right now licenses are loosening up, states are loosening up restrictions, because we want to make sure that everybody can get the support they need. So there are more and more providers that are providing therapy, med management when they can, you know, through Skype or, you know, specific HIPAA compliant platforms. And, you know, I suspect that when we come out of this, we're going to actually see more and more people accessing care that way, right? Because you can do a session at home during lunch. If you're in your office, you can shut the door, but people can still get the care they need if you're noticing signs and symptoms of some of the things that we're talking about today. So actually, I think our next slide is really just is information about some of the resources that we have. And I know that we've mentioned quite a few things, but at our website, we have a page specific to the coronavirus, so COVID-19, There are some webinars there on resiliency and managing anxiety and fear during the coronavirus, as well as lots of information about medical. So feel free to check out the information there. And you may find some of it to be very helpful to support your employee population.
And that's available to non-Cigna customers as well as Cigna customers as is. And I did also want to add, on that virtual health piece, we have been seeing an understandable uptick in the amount of people accessing virtual care for physical ailments, which, it's always been a great resource for employees, but it can be tough to remind people that that's an option. And I think that, due to our restrictions on leaving our houses, people have been kind of forced to turn to the virtual care. But what's great is that we're seeing such high utilization, successful outcomes with the virtual care. And then, we're anticipating that moving out of this, there will be a continued use because now people have used it and seen that it's an easy model to follow, and that they can have a very similar experience to being in a provider's office. So I think that, it's not great that we're being forced to use virtual care because of what's happening in the world right now, but it's exposing people to different options for receiving care. And we think that that's going to be a good thing at the end of the day.
Well, thank you, Carly and Sandra. That was really a comprehensive overview of some things to be considering for employers and employees. A few takeaways that I noticed. One, the one slide on you need a plan. I think it was plan was an acronym. I think that's a great slide, and we will send out this presentation to everybody so you can maybe distribute that, folks, to your employees. I think the other thing that was really important for people to hear is taking advantage of your EAP. Cigna is unique that they have I don't want to put words in your mouth, a baked in medical EAP right in your plans, which is great. But most people on the line may have access to an EAP through their disability provider or some other EAP. So taking advantage of that, I thought was really valuable. And then finally is really reaching out to your carrier. Again, Cigna was gracious enough to put this webinar together that's really useful to anybody. And I think that's really important. And I appreciate that for Sandra and Carly to do that. But many of the carriers, there's a tremendous amount of information out there. We encourage you to reach out to us as your agent or to your agent and or your insurance companies to get access to that type of information. So thank you so much. Any other closing comments from Sandra or Carly before I'm going to open up the lines a minute for some Q&A?
No, I think happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, I just unmuted all the lines, so feel free to ask a question if you have one.
And this is the password.
Okay. All right, some chatter in the background. Anybody have any questions? As you're thinking, as a reminder, this will get sent out to everybody, so you'll get a copy of the presentation and the recording. And again, I'll ask any questions.
I do not have any.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank Cigna Healthcare and Sandra.
Yes.
And Sandra and Carly for participating in today's call. And thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful Friday and have a wonderful weekend. And I think that's it for today's presentation.
Capital ICS. Capital F.
All right. Well, thank you.
And then the rest
Thanks,
of it.
everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Is lowercase.
Oh, it's 202.
Bye-bye.